ladies and gentlemen and colleagues here. On behalf of NRGI and our partner, the Africa Center for Energy Policy, I would like to warmly welcome you and to today's public dialogue on resource-backed loans. Across Africa, we are witnessing an increasing trend by government to sign significant resource-backed loans, RBLs. These loans provide governments access to finance in exchange for future streams of income from natural resource wealth, such as oil and minerals, and Chinese entities are the dominant lenders in the space. So as we engage in today's dialogue, it is critical to know that Chinese state-owned companies have strategic interests in securing natural resources and will throw all their experiences and capacity into negotiating a good deal.
There's been quite a number of write-ups, research work around resource-backed lending, both in Ghana and outside of Ghana. We will look at RBLs and Africa's debt or developing countries' debt, what RBLs are and why they matter. We'll look at some transparency issues, also with regards to EITI disclosures, as well as EITI guidance. RBLs and infrastructure, because we know these are usually used to finance infrastructure, whether RBLs are a cheaper source of financing, and the opportunities and some risks of RBLs, what government should do, and some key messages and recommendations. Regardless of the form or shape in which government makes use of these resources to secure funding, though all those categories of funding arrangements are broadly categorized as resource-backed lending. All these resource-backed loans have a feature of swapping or putting future resource revenues at risk for easier access to immediate funding. In the NRGI study of about 52 resource-backed lending, majority of these loans came from China. And so we have China leading in the grant of these loans for a number of reasons. We found that, again, I said there are about 52 loans. But if you want to unpack this and look at the individual sectors, you realize that the oil sector is sort of leading. We also have the power sector, multiple infrastructure, including roads, housing, education, agri, and even budget support. Now, the Sino-Hydro bauxite for infrastructure deal is the third major RBL deal that we wanted to look at, specific to Ghana. Original sum 2 billion. The term again is 15 years with the deferred Sino-Hydro arranged project financing. The resource collateralized is alumina or aluminium to a strategic off-taker. The Master's Project Support Agreement said that if the aluminium wasn't enough to cover for repayment, they were going to use other GOG sources. We are not too sure what these GOG sources are, maybe tax revenue, who knows.
Let me say that the Ministry of Finance is committed to transparency, and we are ready to share everything that we do with Ghanaians and all who are interested. The only problem is that certain loans has certain clauses, and all of us knows that there are some clauses in loans that are non-disclosure. We can't disclose them until the expiration of some of the loans.
The very point about going for these loans then means that government is going to negotiate supposedly in good faith for and on behalf of the people of the country. So in Ghana's case, with Sino-Hydro. But we have also seen, and the evidence shows, that sometimes there are other political imperatives that come into the equation. And that is where I think that the aspect of transparency becomes important.
The decisions are made about people's resources found in people's lands, but then they're not sitting on the table when those decisions are being made about where the investment should be put.
Engagement can be very tricky. If stakeholder engagement, if I've developed everything and I sit you in a meeting for 30 minutes, I have engaged you.
please, let's also carry the media along as one of the stakeholders who understand these things very well, and then inform the public very well, so that when the public agree with the decisions, they would have been agreeing based on relevant information that they have.
Again, many times communities or citizens contest the extraction of these resources. During that time, the repayments already started. So we've seen that in Kenya. The big part is that even before the projects have started, the resources have started being extracted, you're already starting to pay the loan because you've given the guarantee. So I think that was a critical thing that came out, but also the big thing about corruption.
For me, the huge issue there is when you take resource-backed loans, you are creating the conditions where you cannot save any funds at all. And if you do not invest, you consume, you're then going to fall back on other sources to pay that might not help grow your economy.
A lot of the infrastructural loans that have been taken, again, resource-backed loans, we found that you think it is, the country paying, but through a conduit, like in Kenya, for example, we know that the standard gauge railway, we think we're paying the Chinese, but we're paying the Kenyatta family, and this came out in the Pandora Papers. We're paying the Kenyatta family through the Chinese. And so there's an increase in this where states, people in the dance between politics and corporations has seen, the push for these loans, but in many ways it is finding new ways of bringing in corruption. And so many countries are actually seeing that the politicians within their countries are actually the beneficiaries of the loans that are being paid by the citizens.
If you don't have a very strong democratic accountability systems, resource-backed loans tend to erode democratic accountability, because the Chinese don't care whether you are slaughtering your people or roasting them. The choices which are set out, the parameters within which the public servant acts, are determined by the politicians. It's not likely that a senior civil servant decided on Sino-Hydro.
But what if we are going into this deal, and then the politicians don't disclose because it will affect the upcoming election, the communication of this? In most cases, that has been the case, and we know that.
A lot of this, but again, the biggest role is the role of Parliament in this. And what is Parliament doing, and what support system does Parliament have to approve a lot of this law? I think that would be.
All right. But maybe my question to you, Mr. Chairman, would be, if you look at some of these RBLs, particularly in Ghana's case, and you look at the speed with which they are negotiated, it then appears you are able to quickly appreciate all the risks that we're talking about, to be able to quickly enter into those kind of arrangements.
It depends on where you sit. So, for instance, Sino-Hydro, the processes started in 2017. It took a year before an agreement was signed. So if you compare your resource-backed loans, the terms that we have had of the three that we have had in the past, and you compare it to the Eurobond, this is far cheaper.
Whether you're taking Eurobond or whether you are financing it with an RBL, there is still the big question that needs for us, we need to have a big conversation, I think, on the quality of the investments that government actually makes.
Do the grandchildren of our grandchildren get born not having any resource already belonging to them because it was already mortgaged out there? At what point do we stop? At what point do we say, let this be for intergenerational?
It's policy. It's about policy formulation. I just asked my brother if we have a policy on RBL in this country. He said no. So in many cases, RBL decisions are not based on policy needs. They are really driven by political initiatives. And I think that is a fundamental problem, where economic sense of projects are secondary, and then political necessities trump the economic viability of these projects.